Welcome to the monthly policy update. We'll be getting started in just one moment. All right, I see folks joining the room and gathering. Thank you for joining us on the February monthly policy update. I'm Ben Kershaw. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Government Relations at Independent Sector. I'm joined today by Wes Coulomb from our trusted partner from Washington Counsel Ernst & Young, and by my intrepid government relations colleague, Ana Montañez. Before we start, I want to respectfully acknowledge I'm joining you today from Greensboro, North Carolina. It's the ancestral home of the Seraw Indians. And today, North Carolina recognizes 8 tribal nations. And I hope that we can honor them, their legacies and their current work in the work we do today. If you're unfamiliar with Independent Sector, your first Independent Sector gathering, welcome. We're a national membership organization comprised of nonprofits, foundations, and corporate giving programs, working to ensure all people living in the United States thrive. Your lines are muted today. We'll pause frequently for questions. Please feel free to drop them in the chat or in the Q&A box. As I turn things over to Wes Coulomb with Washington Counsel Ernst & Young, I'll note it's a rainy day here in North Carolina. And I'm hoping that that's not an omen for some of the nonprofit sector's many priorities that are bubbling at various levels on Capitol Hill. So Wes, what can you tell us about the lay of the land right now as it impacts the charitable sector's priorities on Capitol Hill and in the administration?
Yeah, Ben, thanks for the question. Good to be with you all this afternoon. Congress is out of session this week and coming back next week. Obviously, the legislative front, they have a lot of work to do it ahead of them. But obviously the events of this week with Ukraine, Russia's special situation is going to probably overtake, I think, their agenda when they get back next week and have to deal with that. I'm not sure they've seen the president administration impose sanctions on Russia. There was some talk of doing sanctions legislation before I left town for the recess last week, but that was more of a deterrent type effort. But I would imagine they'll have some sort of legislation to respond to what's transpired in Ukraine this week. I'm just not sure exactly what, but I would imagine it's going to be top of mind and top of agenda for Congress next week. From as far as like events we have scheduled, we have obviously the President's State of the Union address next Tuesday on the 1st. That will where he's going to lay out, I think, what he's done this last year in office and also their agenda for going forward. I'll imagine it's going to be foreign policy heavy, given the circumstances in Ukraine as well, but I'll also talk about what they're looking to do in this year. Don't forget, this is a mid-term election year, and so there's lots of focus already about the November elections, and both sides kind of starting to stake out their positions and their campaign postures for November. So we'll see, I think, some flavor seep in the legislative process as well. And the big item on the must-do list the next few weeks is the appropriations process. We've seen several CRs from September to December and now into February, and then now into March 11th is the most recent CR deadline that they have to meet. My understanding is they're pretty far along in reaching a deal on the appropriations package with the top line numbers and the various pieces of the omnibus package to get that finished for the full year appropriations. Obviously, some of the policy writers have been an issue and will continue to be an issue, and hopefully they can work those out. I think they can by March 11th. That's going to be top of mind effort when they get back next week, is to see if they can finish that omnibus appropriations package in the next 2 weeks by March 11th deadline, which I think they can do. We've been following, as you know, Ben, the Build Back Better Act. It's gone through the various iterations of the last 6 months, the House passing a bill, Senator Manchin pretty much putting the halt on that bill in December. Not a lot of negotiations taking place in January. And now I think we're kind of back into what can they get done? What can they do going forward? I think there's a sense that they can try to get together when they come back in March on a more narrower package, a more targeted package. Talk has been around a climate energy title only, with some tax increases to pay for that. Senator Manchin has been complaining about, concerned about inflation, concerned about the size of the package, concerned about some of the provisions in there, including the child tax credit. Want some changes to that, which expired, as you know, the higher payments, refundability piece, and the advance payments expired at the end of 2021. So that's still on the table potentially. Can they get that included in the package? The other question is what more can they do on some COVID relief? That's been a topic of discussion. Some more spending, the need for healthcare products and services to deal with testing and vaccines, et cetera. Administration has about a $30 billion package they've been talking about. There's also been lots of conversation about bringing back the employee retention tax credit, or some additional expanded PPP or loan funds for some industries that have been hit by the pandemic and still need some relief. The sector's been working on the earned income tax credit, or not earned income tax credit, the retention tax credit coming back, and that's something that I think has been discussed on the table. The question is whether or not it will be part of the omnibus package, or will it move separately, a separate vehicle outside of the omnibus package. My sense is that they usually just try to do one big vote in these things and put them all together, but they could conceivably try to move it separately after they finish the omnibus package in March, and so we'll see how that plays out. Obviously, you also have the Supreme Court nomination and the vacancy for Justice Breyer's retirement that will consume a lot of time for both the administration and then obviously the Senate to have meetings and hearings, and then have the debate and vote on the Senate floor, and that will dominate the next couple of months as well in the conversation as they go forward. Another piece of legislation that's on a bipartisan basis is the Competes Act. It's also the China Competition Bill. Different versions of different names for this legislation. It's passed. Different versions have passed the House and passed the Senate, but it's been on a bipartisan basis, and people looking at that as a possible vehicle to do some more, spending incentives, mostly for the U.S. supply chain. The semiconductor industry has been pushing for some relief and some domestic investment help. And that's part of the package. So we'll see how that bill expected to go to conference sometime in March, and probably not get finished until later in April or May, depending on how that conversation goes. But that's kind of on the table for another bipartisan package you think that could get done in this year, next year's time frame. So I'll kind of stop there and say, well, one other item also on the table is the extender package. Right, we went through 2021 without passing extenders. They've expired. A number of healthcare and other healthcare provisions, other energy provisions. The non-itemizer charitable deduction expired at the end of the year. That was put in the CARES Act. That's now expired, and so there is some conversation about how do we deal with an extender package. There's some have been pushing it on the omnibus package. I don't think that really is the vehicle where it's likely to get dropped in, but sometimes those things can happen at the 11th hour. And they move quickly, so we'll have to see. But I would imagine that's probably something to be talked about over the course of the next several months. It could find its way into the Competes China Competition bill as well, because there is an R&D expense provision that expired at the end of 2021 that the high-tech industry has been pushing to get fixed as part of that package, and so maybe that could be a vehicle for some other things in there. To watch that. If not, I think probably it's more of a December end of the year once again exercise on the extender package. So those are kind of some things on the table. I think that we'll see what happens when they come back next week in the post recess efforts on Ukraine, what the president says in the State of the Union address, if they can finish up and how the omnibus package gets resolved by March 11th, and that's going to set the table for what they can do in there and what else gets done over the course of the next couple of months.
Got it. Thank you, Wes. And so I have a few things to dig in on, and hope folks will submit questions as you are ready, as you are able. You mentioned Ukraine, Wes, and I'm remiss in not acknowledging the terrible situation in Ukraine. Certainly, it impacts our work, but at the end of the day, our work is about helping people, and there's a whole lot of need and pain in that part of the world right now. Our hearts go out to them. It also has a potential to have legislative impacts, and right, you mentioned the administration sending up a supplemental spending request in the healthcare space that some of us have hoped could be expanded to be about other COVID relief measures. Do you see the situation in Ukraine and any U.S. response either complicating the March 11th deadline, or do you see creating an additional supplemental vehicle? How do you think that impacts the process? Granted, it's I know it's only been 16 hours.
Yeah, good question. I would think they're going to spend some time on it in both the House and the Senate. And the Senate usually is a little more long-winded, as you know, in speaking and taking time for things than the House is. But I don't think it's going to push back or derail the omnibus negotiations, omnibus package. I don't think it will also push aside the supplemental spending package. Usually when they have these kind of situations, they need more funding that comes after the fact, months after the fact, rather than ahead of the fact. I mean, the only thing I think that Congress will do is probably, have various resolutions denouncing Putin's actions, and then potentially some sanctions legislation. But that was really more of a deterrent conversation rather than after the fact conversation. But there's still more they could do. I think the president has sufficient authority to act. But if they think he needs more authority, they want to make a stronger statement, they can do that. But I would think that would be bipartisan, and it would be debated but move fairly quickly through the House and the Senate and on the president's desk, any sort of resolution. So I don't think it's going to really push aside the omnibus package or the COVID relief efforts that they're working on at the moment.
It's helpful. Thank you. So I will again invite our guests to submit your questions in the chat or the Q&A. And I want to now turn to Ana Montañez. I think we'll come back to Wes in a minute, but there are a number of other key issues for the charitable sector that are at play right now, and Ana has some updates on those issues for us today.
Thank you, Ben. So yes, Ben mentioned there's a bunch of other things going on for the sector this month. I would say kind of like a heavy legislative month regarding nonprofit, legislation concerning nonprofits. So the first thing I would mention is that at the beginning of the month, Representative Shelley Pingree and Tom Reed introduced the House version of the bill known as the ACE Act, and that stands for Accelerating Charitable Efforts Act. The number is HR 6595. And what this bill would do is that it would reverse current law that dictates the pace and the transparency of resources that flow from private foundations and donors' advice funds. We know that this is an issue that the sector is watching closely, and this is a very hectic issue in the sense that, proponents say that it would definitely bring more transparency into making sure that money is dispersed in a timely manner to organizations in need, and there are others that think that this would complicate things and that things are already working as they should. So the last thing that I would say about this is that you may recall that Senators King and Grassley introduced the Senate version of the bill last year. And if you want to look up the bill number, that is S1981. So that's something that we're currently watching. We think that this issue may pick up some traction. We don't know, but we just wanted to make you alert of the situation. Also changing gears into more kind of a relief measure for nonprofits that it's very needed at this point. Also early this month, there was a bill that would restore the employee retention tax credit introduced in the Senate. Senators Hassan and Tim Scott introduced the Senate version of the bill that would reinstate the employee retention tax credit for the fourth quarter. If you recall, this legislation was introduced earlier last month in the House, and it has overwhelmingly support from Ways and Means members. The bill was introduced in the House by Representative Carol Miller and Stephanie Murphy, and at this point it has 54 bipartisan co-sponsors. We believe that this bill it would help a lot nonprofits to retain the workforce, as you all that are on the line know that these are tough times. We're still recovering from the pandemic, and we're just trying to retain the workforce. I would say that the introduction of the Senate bill comes after more than 70 nonprofits and businesses sent a letter to the administration and Congress asking for the reinstatement of this credit. The big issue here is that a lot of organizations, even businesses and nonprofits, already incorporated or had this credit in their business plans, and all of a sudden, of course, the credit was eliminated because of the approval of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act as a pay for. So an issue that we're closely watching. It may take some traction and hopefully be included in an extenders package. But as Wes mentioned, there's a lot of uncertainty as to what can get into an extender package, or if there will be an extender package after an omnibus. So we're gonna continue watching this issue. Last but not least, the last thing that I would mention is that a coalition of more than 60 national nonprofits has sent a letter to congressional leaders and the Biden administration asking them to apply policies that would allow nonprofit organizations to continue recovering from the pandemic. This letter asks more specifically for the extension and expansion of the temporary $300 charitable deduction that was enacted in the CARES Act and that unfortunately expired at the end of last year, as well as other measures that would allow the nonprofit sector to retain its workforce, like the reinstatement on the employee retention tax credit. And I know that I've been talking a lot, so I am going to pass it on to Ben now.
Thank you, Anna. Excellent updates. We appreciate all of your insights there. So, I have a question based on something Anna said, that, Wes, maybe you have a sense of this. Right, so this Senate version of the ERTC Restoration Act has not just Senators Hassan and Tim Scott, but a number of other bipartisan co-sponsors. It's even picked up co-sponsors since it was introduced. One of them is Senator Cardin, who is, co-leading negotiations along with Senator Wicker on a potential relief package. So, boy, that's a good person to have in your corner. It certainly doesn't matter if there is no relief package at all, but Wes, what's your sense of that relief package, and kind of whether a tax provision would have any home in that, or not? Right, thematically, it feels like something that makes sense to us, helping out restaurants and gyms and nonprofits. But we know what makes sense doesn't always jive with congressional jurisdiction. How should we be thinking about that, Wes?
Yeah, good question. I think that Cardin supports both, but I think he's been driving the the loan program relief, the non-tax portion, as you mentioned. I think they've been trying to keep them separate. I think it will be up to leadership to determine, one, how they want to process something if they want to do something, and then two, what vehicle would they use to do that, right? So, the most logical vehicle in my mind would be omnibus appropriations bill, right? That's going to be loaded up with all sorts of different things. It's going to be a big, trillion plus, trillion and a half. It's going to be a large package, right? So tucking a few, tens of billions here and there into it it doesn't get as noticed as much. But that needs to be really a leadership call. And do they want to expand the bill to have non-appropriations provisions in there, right? And tax, has historically been, an outlier in the sense that once you start putting tax provisions in an appropriations bill, people want to add more stuff to it, do other things, right? That's what I'm saying. If they start going down that path of doing ERTC, maybe you'll say, well, let's do the extenders and let's do the R&D piece, let's do the charitable deduction extension, let's do all the other energy provisions in there. And so that kind of gets, could be cumbersome and problematic from a leadership standpoint. So I think it really depends on what leadership wants to do, if they want to open that door or not, or keep the COVID relief package separate and move that in a different way, in a different time on its own version, right? I think that the strength of the COVID relief has the votes for it. The question is, how can you process it through the House and the Senate, right? And easier just to tuck it on an appropriations bill that's going to be voted overwhelmingly by both Republicans and Democrats in the House and the Senate, probably when they actually get to the vote on it. Whereas trying to move a separate smaller package by itself to the House and Senate could run some complications. People want to add their things to it, or make a change here, make a change there, right? It's less controllable. So it's a long answer way of saying, it's unclear what they're going to do from a vehicle standpoint, but vehicle and how you get it processed is also in the leadership's mind of getting something done. Once you make a decision to do something, okay, how's the best way to do that? And finding the vehicle that's going to move quickly is really the best option. So the appropriations bill to me is the best option to do something quickly on this, but they might say, no, it's going to too complicated. We got other things we got to deal with. Let's keep it separate and move it on. So, and also like the tax portion sometimes can bring complications in of itself because it brings other tax provisions to it that they might want to avoid that conversation. So, so I think that, my recommendation would just keep pushing for relief. I think there's openness on both sides to do relief. The question is just what vehicle, and that's up to leadership on how they want to process the package. So if we just keep pushing for, we need something to help now, let them figure out how to process it. Hopefully it'll get done soon.
I'll note that in addition to the very important sign-on effort that Anna mentioned, there is now an additional nonprofit and for-profit organizations sign-on effort in support of including the ERTC Restoration Act in upcoming legislation. So independent sector is proudly part of that coalition and that letter, and we'll be sure to share that opportunity when we share out notes. I will pause one more time for questions or allow Anna to jump in with any questions she has.
So Wes, in my recent meetings with some Ways and Means staffers, and there's been kind of some frustration that, of course, there have been several provisions that have led to the expire, and the problem that causes when trying to extend those, which would have to be retroactively, and also there's the issue of not being able to to know if indeed an extenders package will come together. What is the same thing that you're hearing the same things? What would you suggest for us as advocates to what's the best way to approach staffers when talking about these issues, since I seem that there's a lot of frustration on the Hill regarding this topic.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think that, like I said, kind of go back to my conversation about leadership versus the regular members of the House and the Senate. I think the strategy should be just to keep pushing both leadership and the members to be supportive of trying to get something done sooner rather than later, especially because things have expired, right? People need to count on those and so certainty about the tax policies. But that argument, unfortunately, has not always won the day. And extenders, as you know, has been a tough sale to do ahead of time. It's like one of the things Congress has now reflexively and historically done after the fact. Unfortunately, is not a good way to run an operation or run the business or run the government. But that's kind of unfortunately the way they've been doing things, is waiting until the end of the year to go back and do it retroactively, almost the entire year in many cases, to get it finished and done. It's like the strategies, like I said, to keep pushing, keep gaining support from members, to raise to leadership. At the end of the day, it's going to be leadership's call as to where they want to put that and how they want to negotiate that package. They want to do it now, they want to wait till the end of the year, or they want to do it somewhere else on its own. I think extenders rarely go by themselves. They usually go as part of a bigger package. And so it's either going to be, my view, either this spring as part of one of these packages, or probably not wait until December, unfortunately, get done. So the push, it should be, let's get it done now. Let's do it, get some certainty for taxpayers and get it done in this environment, and do it quickly and push them to do that.
December tax incentives for things that happen in the spring and summer is right. It's no one's idea. No one's idea of good for charities or good for those who are worried about the federal budget too.
Exactly right. The incentive effect of doing something after the fact is definitely diminished. That's always been a problem.
I don't see any questions in the chat yet, Ben, but I would also wanted to ask about, there's been, in these conversations that I had with staffers, there's a lot have mentioned issues with the IRS being able to process not only tax returns, but a lot of filling out questions on the ERTC and different changes that have come in law. I'm not sure what you're hearing from, what Congress is planning to do regarding the IRS, if there's something that will come together to better support the IRS or for this tax season.
Yeah, good question, right? There's lots of members of Congress who are concerned about the IRS being able to handle this tax season, right? They've been understaffed, underfunded. The Build Back Better Act had a big, substantial increase in their funding, which people generally supported. Although the Republicans have been skeptical because they've not been that fond of the IRS's activities in the past. But I think that there's recognition that the IRS does need more funds, more support, in order to administer the tax system. The problem is that it's kind of, for this tax season, it's kind of late, right? They're already kind of into February, and before you know it, April will be here, and we'll be pretty much done with the filing season. But they do need some more help. So I think that there will be some more funds in the appropriations bill for the IRS. But as far as getting this tax season any more assistance, probably a little bit too late. So I think members of Congress are going to be pushing for the IRS to do better customer service, to reallocate funds, to process returns that were not done even from last year. Given that a lot of people did paper returns and they have to go back and process those. I would expect both the Ways and Means Committee and the Finance Committee to have a hearing sometime in early April on the IRS and the tax filing season process. It could be in March. They usually do that around this time, and so I expect them to kind of call up the IRS commissioner and grill him with a lot of questions about the tax filing season and get some more answers and push him to do better.
Thank you, Wes.
In the meantime, we've got, dueling press releases coming out from the Democratic and the Republican staff. I know at least of the Ways and Means Committee. So certainly an issue that folks on the Hill are paying attention to and trying to think about solutions on. That's right for those organizations waiting for ERTC in particular. It's particularly painful delays. So on that positive note, I want to thank you all again for joining us this afternoon. Thank you for the work you do Thank you as always, Wes and Anna, for your partnership. We look forward to seeing you next month, but we know we look forward to working with each of you in the days and weeks to come. Thanks again. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.